evening, everybody. Welcome. We are live from Books and Books here in Coral Gables, Florida, or as we like to call it, the cultural heart of the city. My name is Steve. On behalf of everyone here at Books and Books, we welcome you. Please take a moment tonight at some point to pick up a copy of our Books and Books newsletter. This will give you a breakdown of all the wonderful events we have here at Books and Books every night of the week. We have celebrity signings, Spanish events, kids events, first-time authors, poetry readings. There's usually something for everyone. And also, don't forget, November, it's Book Fair month. Take a brochure of the book fair. Great lineup this year as well. Such authors as John Cleese, Alexander McCall Smith, even Anne Rice will be joining us. So make sure you pick up a copy of this. You will not be disappointed. The street fair is the 21st through the 23rd, and there's plenty of events to soothe everyone's book-loving taste. And as I say, we are always having events here at the bookstore. We do 60 plus here a month in the store, and we are now live streaming them through the internet. You will see some cameras about the store, which are filming the audience as well as the authors tonight for the live streaming. If you are watching on live stream and you want a copy of the book tonight, you can always call the store at the number on the screen and order a book. We'll have it signed for you and we'll ship it to you. And I will also say that for those of you that are here in the audience and the cameras that are pointed for the Q&A part of the presentation, you might want to just make sure that for the benefit of those watching that you're sitting next to who you're supposed to be sitting next to. I also remind you that flash photography interferes with the live stream presentation, so please refrain from doing that. Again, I encourage you to visit our site for more information about goings on here at booksandbooks.com. You can give us your email address, and we'll send you blasts for everything that goes on so you don't miss a thing. But tonight we are very happy to have with us Adler Guerrier and his Scenes from a Verdant Place. But to officially introduce him is the founder of his book and the publisher of Exile Books. Please welcome Miss Amanda Keeley.
First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for being here this evening, and I wanted to thank Books and Books and Mitch Kaplan for giving me this opportunity. I wanted to encourage everyone after the talk to go and check out everything that's happening in Exile, all the materials we carry there, and also to have a chance to look through Adler's book. And I also wanted to really thank Adler Guerrier for encouraging me to be here at Books and Books. And he's actually the one who got this seed planted in my head that this would be a good place for Exile books to be installed. So thank you. First of all, I wanted to mention that everyone should see Adler's show, Formulating a Plot, that's at the Perez Museum. It's a fantastic show. I got to see it last night I've seen it several times, but I got to see it last night probably for the fourth or fifth time. And every time you revisit it, you encounter something new. You see a different side of Adler and a different part of his vision as an artist, and I find it a good show to revisit because you're constantly discovering something new. Adler, to give you a little background about him, he exhibits at the David Castillo Gallery. He was in the 2008 Whitney Biennial, and he is currently working on a new artist book, which I've not heard the name of yet, but that will be released early next year. When I first came to Miami a year ago, I had the opportunity to visit Adler in his studio and was able to watch the exhibition at PAM evolve. And it also was interesting to see all the images that were constantly being framed on his studio walls and to talk about that and how that language was developing into his exhibition, but then also how that would be published and produced into an upcoming publication. So I'm really excited to watch that reach fruition. Just to give you a little background about the PAM show, which I discovered last night, the title Formulating a Plot is actually from a 1968 court case of a radical black poet, playwright, activist named Amiri Baraka. Baraka was accused, in the words of a judge, of, quote, being a participant in formulating a plot to ignite the spark of violent civil unrest that swept through Newark, New Jersey in 1967. And I thought that was a really interesting stepping off point for Adler to take inspiration and to utilize that material and kind of reinvent it and allow it to emerge into this existing practice and into his show. I also found it really fascinating, being that Baracco was such a radical in terms of his writing, and that I just finished installing the gallery show, which you guys should all go see, called Words in Revolt, which is here at the Books and Books Gallery, and it is about radical and provocative text-based work and statements of identity by artists. So I found that to be an interesting crossover to get this started. I would love to just have Adler come up and talk about his book, Scenes from a Verdant Place, and then also talk about the exhibition and his upcoming publication. Thank you.
I was told I don't need this. All right. I'm going to start, well, with the image, with the cover of the book. Actually, I'm going to skip that. I'll get back to that. Let's start with an image, a couple spread inside the book. It's a small artist book. The challenge was given to me by Gene Moreno of Name Publication. He asked me to create an artist book, and for me, as much as I've thought of book, I've never thought of actually making one, which is why it took me 3 years to actually do it. But Gene was very patient about that. But part of the book, well, most of the book really, it's focused on a series of photographs that date from 2003, 2004, mostly in this yard where I live with my wife and daughter at the time. And it offered for me, it was an opportunity to examine place in the very confines of where I live, the sort of circles of privacy, the sort of circles, and how it sort of fades away to become a block, eventually a suburban block, and larger and larger toward being a larger metropolitan area. But in the sort of micro focus, I wanted to examine and continually to re-examine just one site, the place that I live, and to see if I can find sort of a renewal within it. And that was sort of the original work. And the book itself, designed 10 years after those photographs were taken, proved to be kind of challenging as the distance in time, reviewing those images became immediately nostalgic to me. But I wanted to push it beyond sort of revisiting a moment that was fruitive in my own life. And so part of the idea was to present photography in book form as spreads, and coupled with either other photographs or a design that itself takes inspiration from the photographs. So a book is an interesting thing because one always have to deal with the spread, not just one page versus another. And the book is titled Scenes from a Verdant Place, mostly because I wanted to treat the spreads of the book as a kind of a scene within a larger narrative. So if each spread itself offers a moment, something to consider, at least 2 images to consider, and that itself is the nugget of narration within the book, that is sort of staged within the photograph in itself, kind of reference very specific place that I once lived and existed, but it's all pushed back in time now. A book is also great sort of individual. There's a one-on-one relationship to a book, so between author and reader. So a presentation on PowerPoint is a poor medium, but as a book form, what one gets is this sort of like consideration of moment, time spent, time lingered, a page that is bookmarked and revisited much later. Those sort of reconsideration are sort of like embedded in the book, and that was kind of a nice thing to consider in designing the book, which was my first design really. Other spreads took on themes that are more layering collage, idea of a wallpaper, layering. In essence, I'm layering the yard on top of the yard. It's kind of a way to introduce a change of time, change of mood, and those design elements themselves, they're sort of an abstraction that I came up with an earlier installation where from these photographs I picked a palette of colors, and as an art installation I installed the photographs with these designs that were done on the wall. And in the book I can replicate that a bit more in a way that I can, well, at the time I didn't think I could do in a gallery. This is one installation where that occurred. This was at Miami Art Central of Red Road when it existed there. An exhibition called 10 Floridian. And the piece is called Green as the Color of My Quotidian Space, but I Hear Brown. And it was really the same series of photographs that this is in the book. But this is where the sort of idea of using photography and abstracted data from the photograph paired with the photograph as an installation can, in a way, extend the possible read of a photograph. So the photos were shown in pairs, which was kind of, I guess, a precursor to this spread idea and scene idea. And the color band on the top and the wall came from one of the photographs, and behind the camera for this installation shot there are some more colors as well. Going backwards in time, this is one of the photographs that was an installation where there is near image like this in the book, even though there isn't exactly. These were the 8 images that were shown in in the gallery. A lot of repetition, a lot of near image. That's sort of a possibility to create a sequence just by introducing a body and taking away the body, photographing the scene at the same time, different time of day, letting light change, this kind of thing. But that's tend to be given in photography. Another installation that was much earlier featured a viewer with binoculars. The general conceit of these work was pretty much the looking, the revisiting, and documenting a different day. Even though South Florida is, a suburban yard in South Florida that is so green reads very consistently over time. And so there were times where I will rephotograph, and at two different time of the year the photos will still look the same. But that had to do more with my own patterning of working than anything else, I'm sure. This was another triad, triptych of images. This one's called In Walk Bud. It's a Thelonious Monk reference. So in essence, that is that group of work. The next group of work, which is for future artist book, I moved my consideration to larger industrial Miami. My concerns were a bit more design embedded in concrete, design embedded in architecture as a kind of embedded language to try to decode and try to build upon. And so in an image like this, introducing a sort of overlay design that takes cues from other images on South Florida landscape. So the book will be an exploration of that, of layering design with some of their source material. I'm very partial to the parts of town that are that seem to have a sort of a remnant layer of narration in them to discover. I mean, at times I'm not sure what that is, and I guess this is a moment where they're enhanced by my own design. But also, there's this idea of it's just framing and focus that actually pushes that sort of like a fine line and forcing an element within the landscape to actually speak more than it should. I'm sure this concrete grill on this wall was originally just intended as decoration, but maybe within the context of the book with other designs that may be more functional or may speak of actual language, we can try to read it as a kind of larger abstract language that is found on the landscape. So I think that's the aim. Different from the backyard that is all plants. There are markers. It's kind of hard to try to read into, what is a surveyor's marker? But I think that's the part that I like as most because it is a surveyor's marker. There was a utilitarian aspect of this mark that ceased, and I'm trying to give it at least another little life. At times, language like lost dog posters can serve that same purpose, especially when enhanced with other design that comes from other places. I kind of like that. And, little kids who are playing on the sidewalk is also in that same realm. So the book is trying to play with all this sort of, again, that public language that exists there, whose ownership is sort of distance and time and may not be around to make a claim. I just like this building. And then another project really is focusing on the palettes of South Florida. So it's just two so I can show you and go back. We have, over time, a definite palette to the way we color our houses and buildings. And so there's using photography to document and going back to sort of a formal layer to try to take just the color as the beginning point. So I'm really concerned in how I can group a series of photographs that come all over town that organize around colors. There's a little bit of that at PAM currently, where there's a nice pink wall that came from these sort of photographs. The pink wall at PAM came from photographing a bunch of pink buildings and pink houses, and especially in suburban neighborhoods. And no two pink is exactly the same. They're always near each other. And so I went to Benjamin Moore with like a sample, and I told him like, okay, let's pare it down to one dominant one. So Benjamin Moore has mixed fruit, which is what they call their pink, and in a way that becomes then the new meter. And so at PAM, so that's the color I use for the work. But I like the fact that even mixed fruit is not really exact, right? Mixed fruit is as much of an abstraction of a language or a design layer on the landscape. I don't know where Benjamin Moore design office is. I know it's definitely not based in Florida, because mixed fruit, pink, it cannot be a proper color for mixed fruit. With mixed fruit, you get deeper, darker colors, but that's a different story. But I like that sort of distant tool to actually create one's home, right? Because there's every house. This is one block on Northwest 7th Street around Douglas. There are 4 houses in a row with 4 different pinks, and it's quite wonderful. But I think there's an aspect of like, oh yeah, the neighbors have a pink, let's do a pink too, but we'll do it slightly different. We'll do it slightly, and in that sort of sense of individuality, I think this is where this sort of aspect of design, language, and architecture, once applied to one's own situation and where one reside, or an aspect of self, this is where those very formal things that are pretty available to us all can take on individualized, even layers of importance. So that's what, in a way, Scenes for Verdant's place was for me. It was a consideration of a place where I live that was really formative for me, and I wanted to package it to share with a larger audience, and that is kind of a thread in a lot of my practice. I thought this was going to be longer, but I think this is it. This is the last slide, I'm sorry to say. Questions? Yes, sir.
Adler, I have a question about the middle series, the one in black and white.
Sure.
Oh,
Okay,
you
go
don't
back.
have to rush back, but
I have not
the
to
at the beginning where you had a picture and then you put a design overlay.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever done that in a gallery setting? Because I feel that a large
Like that?
picture with some of that would probably look pretty dramatic in a big print in a gallery show.
I have done something like this. I did something like this in Fort Lauderdale, Museum of Fort Lauderdale, Museum of Art in Fort Lauderdale. But it's the opposite. I did the opposite. I on the wall of the gallery, I painted the design and placed a frame photograph on top of it. At PAM, I took yet another route. I did the design as a structure that's a self-standing, where you can actually see the rest of the gallery either through it or sort of against it. Yeah, it's something that I think one of the things I like about it is it sort of denies an aspect of image, at least the aspect of image that is recognizable. It's like what is beyond there. It's a football field, and
I was going to say I had a kind of a follow-up relation to this because
sure.
he has done something like that at the museum, but it's a small print. And I was going to ask if you would possibly talk about scale and your use of scale and imagery.
Right. At the museum, well, at both places, at PAM and at Museum for Lauderdale, the scale was a gallery. The design was scaled to a 14 feet wall. And actually, the design is the cover, which I ended up not talking about. In Fort Lauderdale, I have, I'm going the wrong way. I actually have this on the wall, and it's, yep, I have these on the wall. I have two of those, and on top of those there was a photograph, and they're 10 feet tall, and it's a series of band of colors using this this methodology of the palette that I mentioned earlier. So that was the first instance of using the pinks and the yellows and the blues, and it was kind of an impressive reference because the photographs themselves were no bigger than 20 inches. And so a human body would have as much of a relationship with the design on the wall and the palette as much as they had with the frame photograph. The wonderful thing about the book, I can scale it to, I mean, the viewer is all aimed at a viewer. The page determines my scale, and the proportion of the pages as well becomes a thing to do battle with. Whereas in the gallery, because it's architecture, there's a kind of limit to, at least in any room, where what's within our periphery and even a little slightly in that we always measure our body against. And I think that relationship is what is happening at Pam with the structure, whereas in a book it's really dealing with the spread and the layering, and the museum in Fort Lauderdale it was the predominance of design against photography, and photography taking second chair to design.
The picture of the stadium with the design on the side is interesting because it's almost like your design. There's a symmetry, like your design is commenting on the design of the bleachers of the stadium.
I have a question. There's an interesting parallel between what you had talked about with the book and it being a very intimate experience of you basically having an immediacy with the viewer, of looking, you have one audience member, one person looking through this book, and it's this intimate experience. And when I was reading the background text about the Perez Museum show, it talked about a wanderer, about like someone who's isolated, who's wandering through the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I just realized there's a very interesting parallel between these two. Could you talk about a little bit more about the solo isolated wanderer too?
Yeah.
Is that you, or are you putting yourself in that place?
Kind of. I don't think a wanderer is isolated. A wanderer is on a mission, maybe with blinders on per se. This idea of wandering and traveling clearly, generated a lot of books over the years, and which is kind of a wonderful thing. Mostly because we like stories, we like adventures, we like to discover the new thing. But now that the world is fully known to us, it's our focus may not. I mean, this sort of grand adventure and wandering may not be a thing as much as a sort of micro and really focused ones. I think there's a kind of tool set that I try to use in my practice. One where I am looking in very specific things that I may not know of within very specific theaters. That are not necessarily defined by me, but in time tend to reveal themselves. I like that sort of specialized trek to find something of interest. So it's not Humboldt looking for flowers and birds, but it's geometric design and colors that I already know exist, that I haven't seen in a while, or things like that. There's also a thing about knowing your own place of living. Sometime we go to the depths of Kendall to discover if there are new things there we haven't seen lately. We don't take it for granted that Kendall is uniform, so we have to go and check, that kind of thing. And at times we discover, yes, there's a great restaurant there. So that's what makes this idea of travel and wandering as a tool set great. But simultaneously, sometimes there's nothing to report. It's like, it's a great restaurant, but it turns out to be a chain, and there's 5 in town. So
it's like a tool set to constantly rediscover your city, this kind of suburbia that we live in. And like that, the kind of the contrast between it and a lot of your work has to do with like the architectural and the nature, and this kind of back and forth and the duality of civilization and kind of our natural world and what is coexisting. And I see a lot of that reflected in your work.
Yeah, this idea of civilization is it's key, because it's like, especially where we live, where in a way we're both is but a place for a lot of immigrants to come through, a lot of tourists to come through, also people remotely affecting the landscape. So in a way, this has always been a place where the landscape has changed in time for reasons that are not always obvious. And so there are opportunities to rediscover. So it's both a combination of what is firm and stable, and really fluid things that reflect usage, that reflect people. I think those are the kind of thing that tends to be really interesting. So one other thing about, let me see, about this type of architecture that has these concrete blocks is that, it's a language that it's not championed currently in architecture. Not on a larger scale, but it's still being used like it was in the 40s and 50s as kind of a highlight, a kind of a gesture of decoration. It's as much fun to see it in a building, an apartment block from the 50s. That's nothing to cry home about as well to find it in some, great modern building that was built tomorrow or yesterday. I think that is the thing. It's like it's trying to reserve judgment for later and try to find that thing, because the landscape is full of those things. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's early. It's only 20 after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Room, we've got a wonderful display of their artwork along the gallery wall as well. If you're watching online, give us a call here at the store. We'll get a book signed for you and ship it to you. We've got some live music coming up, and enjoy yourselves here at Books and Books for the rest of the evening. Thank you so much for coming. Good night.